Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Prepping for Everything podcast with me, your host, Emily. It's currently Sunday when I'm recording this. I know I should try and keep you all in the moment and say happy Wednesday, but let's be real, it's not Wednesday. I need time to record and edit the podcast before it comes out. So it's Sunday. And I feel a little bit fried recording this today. Our baby, Rosemary, is going through a 4-month sleep regression, and oh my gosh, I thought her sleep couldn't get much worse than what it always is. She is breastfed. I don't know if that's anything to do with it, but she wakes, since she was born, at least every 2 hours during the night. And I can deal with that. I thought 2 hours, okay. Everyone kept going on about this 4-month sleep regression. I was like, well, I don't even think we're going to go through that because let's be real, her sleep couldn't get much worse than what it is. Boy, was I wrong. Was I wrong? Motherhood is just a collection of moments where I get slapped in the face, left, right, and center, and then also feel this overwhelming love that I've never felt before in my life. It's a roller coaster. But right now, I finally got her down for a nap. She has been doing this thing the past few days where she only falls asleep on my boob. She needs to be on her side. We need to be lying down and I need to be patting her bum and she needs to be feeding. And that's the only way that I can get her to sleep. And I can't do that forever. During the night, she'll go to sleep and then she'll stir 10 minutes later and she needs to go back on. And it just means that I don't sleep. I'm just so worried about crushing her. And then she eventually does fall asleep and I lie there thinking, well, there's no point in going to sleep because she's going to be awake soon. And then, of course, it's been so hot recently. It's about 20 degrees here, which is so rare for the Highlands of Scotland. I don't really know what's going on. This happened last May as well. We got this really hot burst in May. And then it ruined all the crops that we were growing because they got false hope that it was summer and then it got really cold again. And I have a feeling that's going to happen again this year. But this temperature change overnight has put me all wrong. I don't know what to dress her in. I'm worried that she's too hot and then I'm worried that she's too cold during the night. And then, of course, there's always that narrative in the back of your head that everybody keeps repeating over and over and over. And it's that a cold baby cries, but a hot baby dies. And it's just awful. I just feel like an anxious wreck at the moment. This whole time I'm like, I need to record the podcast. I need to record the podcast. So here I am. I don't know what kind of podcast you're all going to get today, but I'll try my best to make it through the sleep deprivation, the anxiety, the overwhelm. I've said it once and I'll say it again. I don't know how mothers have made this look so easy. I feel like I've been dragged through a bush backwards and it just keeps going on this never-ending loop. Okay, anyway, all that being said, today we're going to talk about prepping for your newborn. Who am I to coach anyone on prepping for your newborn? Who knows? I think I need somebody to teach me how to prep for a newborn. Do I sound delulu? Because I feel a little bit delulu. I'm going to go off on one last tangent before we actually get into the nitty-gritty of prepping for a newborn. But I was speaking with somebody recently. They are from the Isle of Lewis. It's actually one of my dad's friends. Really sound guy. I asked him to come on the podcast to tell this story and he was a little bit nervous, but he said that he would. But he works offshore on an oil rig and you don't get very good signal there, so we can't do it. I was going to call him and then just record through the microphone, but unfortunately he's not going to be onshore for a while yet, so I will do my best to retell this story. It's about his granny. So way back when, I think it was 1936 or 1939, he said, and she lived in one of the little islands off the west coast of Scotland and she was pregnant with his mother at the time. She went into labour and of course it was pretty uncommon back then to even go to a doctor. Most people were born at home and there wasn't such a thing as ultrasounds or anything else. And she didn't know that she was pregnant with twins. She thought that there was only one baby coming out. So she was in labour, she had her baby, and she still didn't feel right. This baby was tiny. They didn't think that this baby was going to make it, so they kept her in a shoebox and kept her close to the fire and just tried to keep her warm. Her name was Mary. And at this point, they still didn't know that the mum had another baby in her belly. So Mary was born and they were just trying to give her little bits of milk. And at that time, they gave her little drops of whiskey as well. This is what was done back in the day to help them get better. But Mary's mum kept getting worse and worse and worse. I wish I knew the granny's name because now I'm just calling her Mary's mum. But she was going downhill and she was getting ill. And they didn't know that there was another baby in there. So she had spent 24 hours at home after birthing one baby without realizing another baby was in her belly. And they thought, right, we need to get to a doctor. Now, the only way to the doctor was to row from one island to another bigger island. They had to take the door off the hinges in the house. They put the granny on this door, or the mum. Oh, I don't know how to tell this story well. I wish I knew her name. It would make this a lot easier. They put her on the door, used it as a stretcher to then put into the rowboat, rowed to the bigger island. She got taken to a doctor and the doctor figured out that there was another baby inside her. Bear in mind, this has been over 24 hours since she birthed the first baby. They managed to get the other baby out, get the placenta out, and everyone made it. Everyone made it out alive. So the second baby was bigger, but they think because she'd been inside for so long, she was fine. But she was consistently ill. Like, she always struggled to get over illnesses. She had allergies and just a lot of everything. And it turns out that the tiny little baby named Mary, the one that was born first, and they put in a shoebox and they were feeding whiskey, she only died recently. She was like this strong as an ox woman who never got ill and just kept going and going and going. And I was just amazed as he was telling this story. I really wish he could tell you it. I don't know, would you understand the accent, especially for any American listeners? People from the Isle of Lewis have this beautiful accent, but it's very Scottish. And I know that a lot of people might struggle to understand it. But if you want to hear more about this story, you can research the Lewis and Harris twins. They had I thought it was the Guinness Book Records, but I couldn't find it. But they held a record because they were the first twins recorded that were born in different counties, which is pretty cool. And as I was Googling it there, I just came across an article on the internet. And apparently one of the episodes of Call the Midwife's Christmas special was based on these twins. So I'm going to leave that article in the show notes below and you can read that if you'd like. I just thought that story was too good not to share, especially during this episode when we're going to be going on to talking about newborns and prepping for babies and all things like that. And it's funny how guidance and advice changes so much throughout the years. Like the 1930s, it was fine to give babies whiskey. Could you imagine nowadays? You would probably get your kids taken off you if you gave your baby whiskey. I was even speaking to my nana and she said, you know, when they had kids, when she was young, that it was really common to dip their dummies in whiskey or red wine, and it would soothe them and help them go to sleep, and obviously it would help them when they were teething. And it's probably what a lot of people only had access to was alcohol as well, right? Yeah, and even thinking back to when my mum had me and my brother, and everything seems to be so opposite in what she was advised to do compared to nowadays. She always tells me that she combi fed, so she gave me and my brother breast milk and formula. And when we were little, she said that was so heavily advised against. Like the midwives were trying to make her choose between one and the other. And she said, I don't want to do one or the other. So she just did what was best for her and what worked for us. And I think when it comes down to it, that is what every mother needs to do. You need to trust your intuition. You need to trust your gut. You know your baby better than anybody else. Any of these sleep trainers, any of these online motherhood gurus, you know your baby. And when we really tune into our intuition and trust ourselves, and stop trying to rely so heavily on outside forces, I think motherhood can become a lot easier. If your baby needs soothed, your baby needs soothed. And maybe I'm sitting here trying to tell myself that just now in the middle of the 4-month sleep regression to try and make it better for myself. I don't know how we're going to go forward. I am definitely not doing the cry it out method. I hate that. Every single spidey sense in my body is on high alert when I hear her cry. It's so against our biology to leave our baby crying. Mamas out there listening to this that have done the cry it out method for sleep training, I am not shaming you. You've got to do what works best for you. And there comes a point that I think, what good is a sleep deprived mum if you can't care for your baby properly? So it's kind of like the lesser of two evils. we've just got to do what works best for us. But I'm at this crossroads just now. I think that we can set up healthy sleep environments and a little bit of training and coaching without going that full method. But hey, check back in a month. We might be down a completely different route. Who knows?
Hi listeners, are you ready to take your preparedness to the next level? My comprehensive online course is a great place to start. From food storage and preservation to water readiness and bag-out-bag checklists, I've got you covered. This is more than just presentation screens. I've also added downloadable worksheets, video tutorials, checklists, and loads of prepping content, which is consistently being added to as we generate new ideas. Not to mention, you get to take this in your own time to fit around your lifestyle, and you get lifetime access to the content. And here's the best part. As a valued listener of this show, you get an exclusive 10% discount with code POD10. That's POD10 to enter into the coupon code section at checkout. Don't miss out on this opportunity to level up your preparedness game. Visit the link in the show notes to enroll today, and together we can build a future where we are prepared for whatever life throws our way. I'll see you there.
So since Rosemary, I have to say that this whole preparedness thing has kind of ramped up. When it was just me and Will preparing for anything or thinking about my family, it was never this intense because I was always thinking about adults. Like even my nieces, they're all a little bit older now. They've got a lot of common sense and they're really clever girls, and I don't worry about them as much if anything were to happen. So going from this only thinking about adults in my life who are perfectly capable of caring for themselves and contributing as a community and all bringing different skill sets to the table, going from that to having this tiny little thing that is completely dependent on you, it's been a little bit different. It's really made me take a step back and think about a lot of different scenarios and I guess take things even more seriously. It was just a bit of a wake-up call. Even like I mentioned on last episode, speaking to somebody from Ukraine, and they were mentioning that diapers and nappies, I say diapers and nappies just so that everybody around the world can understand what I mean when I say nappies, being one of the biggest issues. Like they couldn't get that in shops. It just changes everything. But that's talking about like what things to prep. I want to start with the absolute basics, the boring things of what you can do when you have a newborn. Some of the things that we don't like to think about, like creating a will. God forbid, if anything were to happen to you or your partner, do you have everything written down legally of what you would like to happen with your baby? What you would like to happen with your assets? Who's going to look after them? Where is it all going to go? Is it going to be left to them? How is the baby going to be financially cared for? All of these things. Like there's obviously so much more than finances when it comes to that, but getting all your ducks in a row is going to make horrible situation just a little bit easier when people know your wishes and they're not having to guess or try and figure it out. I also mentioned in the last episode that we appointed my brother and his girlfriend as Rosemary's godparents, and I found out that in the UK that actually doesn't hold a legal title unless you go into like a solicitor and make it that way so that you appoint them as the legal guardians in case anything ever happens. And these are like the little things I know that we never want to talk about, but it really makes sense to have all of this sorted before we think about other sort of preparedness aspects. Another big basic one, which I think is so often overlooked, is when you have a baby or an infant or somebody, even if it's not yours, if you're looking after kids or around kids a lot, or even day to day, I think that we should all know this. I think it should be taught in schools, is CPR. Specifically baby, infant and child CPR. We actually looked for somebody in our local area to come to our house and teach a class of this. I think there was maybe 6 of us, but basically it's just the people who are going to be around Rosemary a lot. I wanted everybody to know how to respond if anything went wrong. Especially as we start introducing foods and all these choking hazards, and it was always a bit of a thought, but I feel a lot more empowered now that I know what's going on and how to respond, because at the end of the day, you are your child's first responder. Yes, we can phone an ambulance, yes, we phone paramedics, we can shout and scream for help, but we need to know how to tackle situations until that help arrives as well. And another thing that I'm going to group into the basics of preparing for a newborn here or bringing a baby into your family is making informed decisions We have so much information at our fingertips, and as long as you can find a reputable source and peer-reviewed studies and data, then you can make a good informed decision. Don't just go with the status quo just because everyone else is doing it. I think often we make really big decisions without actually looking into it or looking into side effects or just questioning a little bit deeper of what's going on. Okay, now on to what to actually prep. This is what everybody asks about. This is probably what you're here for. And one of the big ones that I always mention is nappies, or diapers for my American listeners. Having a reserve of these and having backups is great. Obviously, cloth ones, reusable ones are probably good to have as well in a long-term event, because just say you couldn't get diapers or nappies, you're going to need an alternate option. This is like a minefield to me, but I have a friend that uses reusable nappies, so I went over to hers and I had like this full lesson of how it works and how she does it and how she keeps everything clean. And yeah, it was quite overwhelming. I mentioned before that I thought I was going to use them and then I still haven't got round to it, but I do have some as a backup. I still think maybe at some point in the future I might look into that. Who knows? I'm probably talking myself out of it right now. Another thing that you could look into is elimination communication, and I always think in a long-term situation this is probably the best way forward, because you are letting your baby go as naturally as possible. They're not just soiling themselves and needing help. You're kind of reading their cues, trying to get them to the toilet or a potty in time. And I'm not going to sit here and explain all about elimination communication, but you could look it up. This is a really great option for a lot of people, especially those that are stay-at-home mums or dads and have the time to do something like this. I can imagine this being even harder if you're looking after toddlers and other kids as well, though. So there are advantages and disadvantages of these nappies, or different options if you're looking at a SHTF situation, which is a stuff hits the fan situation. I'm not allowed to swear in this podcast because I need to mark it as explicit. But basically, your reusable nappies, they're good to have, right? They're okay. But for convenience, disposable ones are worth having too, especially if you're on the move. Like, think about if you're bugging out, if you need to leave in a hurry because you're evacuating. The last thing that you probably want to do is think about having to wash these diapers. So in these instances, disposable ones are great. But having both gives you the choice, which is what I always advocate for. And the next prep on our list is size up clothing. If you want to be prepared, if you think that maybe some point you might not be able to access clothing, even for an affordable price or at all, then having a few outfits in your wardrobe for your children that they're going to grow to is a great prep, in my opinion. I'm quite lucky that a girl that I know had a daughter probably 9 months before Rosemary, so I get all of her old clothes for Rosemary, which is great because I've always got a full wardrobe of clothes to fall back on. But I really like this idea of just having 1 or 2 outfits in case you couldn't access anything else. So the way that you would do this is kind of trying to work out how they're growing in line with the seasons that are coming up, because there's no point in having winter clothes that aren't going to fit her at that time. Does that make sense? I don't know. On that note as well, when we're talking about clothing, it's important to go through your bug out bags quite often when it comes to your kids, or even nappy bags and diaper change bags, because right now Rosemary is growing like so fast that I don't even really notice it, and then suddenly she's outgrown all of her clothes. So keeping these up to date with fresh clothes for the season that you're in and the size that they're currently in is really beneficial as well, because normally I recommend going through your bug out bags like 4 times a year. But if they're growing and growing and growing as quick as they are when they're going through these leaps, it might be worth keeping on top of that and changing a little bit more often. Okay, another big one on the prep list is a stock of baby medicine, like your baby ibuprofen and paracetamol, creams, saline mist, which can be good for colds and clearing out the nose, a baby thermometer. The amount of times I have used this on Rosemary is insane. I think she just runs warm, and I always convince myself that she's coming down with something. Is this being a hypochondriac, or is this just being a mum where you're constantly worried about your baby? But anyway, what else?
teething granules or toys for when they're going to be going through that. And Rosemary has only just started teething, but what's really helping her is get these little teething rings. And I think they can be used for first foods as well. But basically I freeze my breast milk into like tiny little cubes and put them in this ring that she can chew on. And that's really great for her gums because it cools her gums at the same time. You should see her. She gets so excited when I'm handing her one of these. Have I just used this podcast as an excuse to talk about Rosemary for half an hour? Probably. But anyway, back to what else can we prep? So you can prep dummies or soothers, as I think they're called nowadays. Is dummy an offensive word on the list of cancelled words? I don't know. And one thing that I would add to the list of things to prep too is a good carry sling for the baby. If you need to walk a distance, this is a godsend. I use this every day for walking Rosemary and the dogs because mostly where I'm going, it's off-road. So the buggy's useless going through the woods and over sticks and over rivers and everything else. Even if you want to think of adding a little one of these into your bug out bag, that could be really helpful if you're having to walk distances on foot. Which leads me into my next point. Is your physical fitness where it needs to be to look after your baby if you need to? And what I mean by that is if you had to run with them, if you had to run out of a situation or evacuate, or like I just said, walk distances on foot. Imagine your car breaking down and you're 10 miles from home in the middle of nowhere and you think, right, I need to walk this distance. I don't have my phone. I don't know, whatever crazy situation you find yourself in, can you do that? And I'm not coming from a braggy point of view. I understand that there are people in the world that cannot do that because of a physical limitation or a disability or something. These are not the people that I'm talking about. I think that your physical fitness is such a massive part of preparedness that is overlooked. Like I said before, you're your child's first responder, and I think it's time that we start acting like it. Okay, now touching on feed and nutrition. It depends on if the baby's formula fed or bottle fed in a preparedness situation. Breastfeeding is best from both a preparedness point of view and a natural standpoint. I'm not here to argue about breast or formula. I really don't care because at the end of the day, your baby just needs to be fed. Like, I'm not here to cause a divide between everything. I'm really not. Don't come for me. But even if you are breastfeeding, it might be worth having some formula as a backup option, just in case your milk supply dries up, or sometimes stress can cause your milk supply to be affected. And if we were in a serious situation, formula would be one of the first things that would clear out from the shelves. And unless you had somebody else on your street that's breastfeeding that would be happy feeding your baby too, you might find yourself in a bit of a sticky situation. I know way back when, or even nowadays in different parts of the world, people use goat's milk to feed their babies because apparently goat milk is as close to breast milk as we can find. Do I fact check myself every single week? As soon as I say something like this, I'm scared to say it with confidence in case I'm wrong. Let's ask the internet. Okay, so there's actually a study done here. You can research it. It's on ncbi.government. Exploring the health benefits and functional properties of goat milk. So goat milk is considered a promising natural source of, how do I say that word? Oligosaccharides. Who knows what that is? Similar to those found in human milk, making it an attractive option for the development of infant formula or follow-on formula and health-promoting products due to its composition and content. Yeah, so you can look into that. It's actually quite interesting, all of this. I love this, and I love a deep dive into all of this. I should have done a lot more research before this podcast, but I'm sorry. I'm trying to raise a baby, and I just do not have enough time. But here I am encouraging you to go and have a look if you're interested in all of this. Yeah, now I'm just scrolling articles. Okay, I'm going to get off here and just let you take over. If you want to look into that more, go and have a little look. But I know that a lot of people did used to keep goats for this reason. Going back to the storage of formula, it's worth noting that formula doesn't keep overly well long term, so it is worth just rotating a few out as you're going along. And then let's think about mum. It's not all about the baby, it's about the mum too, especially if you're breastfeeding and you're lacking sleep and everything else. A good thing to keep stored is multivitamins and energy sachets for you to take. Just trying to look after yourself as much as you possibly can in amongst the haze of having a newborn is so important. And one last thing to prep, because we're running out of time here. Don't underestimate the importance of entertainment, especially for kids and babies. Even just some paper and something to draw with can go such a long way. And toys that are easy to pack if you're going to put a wee bug out bag together or have your car kit sorted. Think about like a little foam stuffed animal that's easy to flatten inside of like a Ziploc baggie, or a cloth or a foam frisbee for kids that are a little bit older. An inflatable beach ball is a good option because that's like really flat pack, right? And I mean one that you can blow up by your mouth, not one that you need a pump for. Or any age appropriate fidget toys. Something little and that's easy to keep is a godsend for any kind of situation like this. Well, thank you for listening. I'm sorry, I've had to stop this podcast 3 times to tend to the baby. You can probably hear in my voice that I am, to quote myself from earlier, feeling a little bit delulu. And I don't know, did any of this make sense? When I'm stopping it so often, it's really hard to get a good flow. Like I don't really know what I've said and not said. And then it comes to editing and that's a whole different ballgame. But I think this might be one of my last podcasts. I think I'm going to do a series and pick it up in a couple of months because right now, Rosemary is the most important thing and she's needing a lot more attention. Going through this sleep regression, it's just hard to do it all. Over the coming episodes, hopefully get some guests on once I figure out how to do that. There's a lot of people that I want to speak to, some preparedness people that I think you would love listening to, and even homesteady people or herbalists, or I can go so far with this, hunters. There's a lot of interesting people that I would love to bring to your ears as well. And before I go, this just seemed fitting because I checked Instagram and somebody on here sent me a thread. It's from Mother Nourish Nurture and it honestly nearly made me cry just now. So I'm going to read that out for any other mamas out there that are sleep deprived and struggling. This one is for you. This is my favorite place, mama. Right here in your arms where the thud of your heartbeat is quieter, but just as familiar as before. It's been a little while since I woke, and I know you must be tired, Mama, but still, you smile when our eyes meet in the darkness. I wish I could tell you with words, Mama, that your smile is the best thing that I've ever seen. I wish I could let you know that your arms feel like home and that this right here is everything that I need. One day I'll tell you with words, Mama, I really will. But for now, I'll rest my eyes and let the perfect thud of your heart carry me to sleep once again. I struggled to get through that without crying. I'm not going to lie, I had to pause this a few times and take a breather because, oh man, these night times are especially wakeful, and daytimes, and solidarity to everybody out there that's going through this just now as well. But this is the perfect place to end this. Thank you so much as always for listening. And I also just want to encourage you, if you haven't subscribed to this podcast, I found out recently that only 35% of listeners who listen every week are subscribed. So if you want to see my episodes keep popping up every week, and if I do take a break, when I come back you'll find out that I'm back again, then please hit the subscribe button. While I am asking you for favors, if you haven't left a review and you enjoy this podcast, please do that as well, because it helps this podcast and it helps other people find it too. Only if you enjoy this podcast. We don't need any kind of negativity around here. Not right now. I don't think I can hack it. Thank you for being here with me and listening to this. I hope you got some value, and I will speak to you again, maybe not next week, but hopefully sometime in the future. Sending you big hugs and love. Bye bye.